My name is Josephine Carter, 32 years old, a neonatal nurse at a hospital in the state of Oregon. 6 weeks ago, I buried my first daughter, little Isabel, under the gray sky of Portland. She had just turned 6 months old. Death came so suddenly, so cruelly, without warning, not a cry, not a final breath. I had rocked her to sleep like every other night, and the next morning only a deadly silence remained in the pristine white crib in the corner of the room. The funeral was held on a Saturday morning at Willamette Memorial Cemetery, which has a section reserved for infants. The casket was so small it looked like it could hold toys. I stood before it, my hands ice cold, gripping the edge of my coat, trying not to collapse. My husband held my shoulders tightly, but the pain pierced through any support. I looked around. My friends were there, my colleagues from the hospital came, neighbors, even some families who had babies in the NICU with Isabel showed up. They brought flowers, tears, and long, heartfelt hugs. But my parents, Elaine and Robert Morgan, the same people who once held me when I was afraid of the dark at age 8, didn't come. I had called them the night Isabel died. My voice cracked with every word. Mom, the baby. Isabel, she's gone. There was a pause. Then my mother spoke in a flat tone like she was reading the weather forecast. Oh, that's unfortunate, but this Saturday is Bradley's engagement party. Bradley, my brother, 37, a tax attorney in California. His fiancée, Vanessa, is an influencer known for sharing minimalist living tips for penthouse life. I remember every word my mother said. Your father and I already confirmed we'd attend. Her side of the family is bringing a lot of people. Canceling would be awkward. And Josie, Isabel was just a baby, you understand, right? I stayed silent. I didn't understand. A few minutes later, I tried again. But it's my daughter's funeral, Mom. My mother sighed. Josie, I know you're heartbroken, but you're still young. You'll have other children. Bradley, though, this is a milestone event. They've booked the pool, the DJ, Texas-style barbecue, hotel rooms for her family flying in from Austin. Everything's set. A chill ran down my spine. Mom, Isabel was your granddaughter, your blood. How could you? Don't make this bigger than it is, Josie. Don't let your emotions make you selfish. Not everyone can just put their entire life on hold. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there in Isabel's room, inhaling the faint scent of milk still clinging to her little blanket, listening to the wind howling outside the window. On the morning of the funeral, I wore a simple, black dress. The same one my mother once said made me look like a divorced woman. I thought to myself, it's true now. I just divorced the illusion that I ever had a real family. As the pastor delivered the final words, my phone buzzed. A message from Bradley. Sorry I couldn't make it. Hope the funeral goes okay. Best of luck. Then came a stream of Instagram posts, my parents beaming, raising glasses of champagne by the pool next to a glowing neon sign. Vanessa said yes. I stood frozen. My blood drained from my hands. Someone called my name from behind, but I couldn't hear anything except the pounding of my own heart. That day, I didn't just bury my child, I buried something else inside me. The belief that if I ever fell, my parents would reach out and catch me. And they didn't. They didn't come. They chose grilled meat, loud music, and dancing instead. I realized I was just a shadow in my family from a very young age. Back in second grade, when I brought home a perfect score on my math test, I remember carefully slipping the test into a little envelope, sealing it with a butterfly sticker, and handing it to my mom with excitement. She was setting the table in the dining room. She opened the envelope, glanced at the paper, and then placed it on the mantel like it was another grocery receipt. That same evening, Bradley was told he had made the Little League baseball team. My mom brought out cupcakes for the neighbors. My dad called Grandpa over for dinner. I stood by the kitchen door, clutching my purple backpack, watching through the frosted glass as the whole family toasted the brightest star of the Morgan house. It didn't say anything. I just learned how to be quiet. My entire childhood felt like a film reel where the camera was always pointed at someone else. I could earn straight A's 12 years in a row, but it still didn't compare to Bradley playing drums in his high school band. When I got accepted into the University of Washington on a nursing scholarship, my mom simply asked, "Are you really going to be a nurse? Don't you want to do something bigger?" But when Bradley was invited to join a financial advising internship in Sacramento, the entire family called it a turning point. Even Michael, my husband, once told me he found it strange how my family never asked about my job, even though I cared for hundreds of newborns each year in the ICU. My mother once said over the phone, "While nursing's tough, don't let stress affect your fertility later." I let out a dry laugh. Turns out the only part of me worth discussing was my womb. When I told them I was pregnant last spring, a tiny part of me hoped, just a flicker, that maybe this time would be different. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone on speaker. "Mom, I have good news. I'm pregnant. Over 10 weeks now." Silence. Then my mom asked, "Oh, but did you hear Vanessa was just selected as the face of a new vegan skincare line? They're shooting in Palm Springs. Everyone's so excited." I gripped the edge of the table. Then my dad chimed in. "That's nice, Josie. Make sure you're eating well. Just don't let the pregnancy distract from Bradley's career, okay? He's about to be nominated for the state advisory board." I'm not exaggerating. They really said that. At the time, I still thought maybe they were just emotionally distant, but over time, that distance stretched and spread like oil on water, cold, impenetrable, and impossible to clean. I sent them a sonogram, no response. Messaged them the baby registry, no one visited. When my best friend Laura threw a baby shower in November, my parents only came because Vanessa tagged them in an Instagram story. They arrived late, left early, and gave me a framed photo of our family from when I was a kid, in which I was standing on the edge. I stood by the dessert table, my belly heavy with life, watching my dad chat with his old friend about Bradley's new Tesla. My mom handed Vanessa her phone for a selfie, her hair perfectly curled, cheeks flawlessly blushed, like she was posing for a lifestyle magazine. And I realized they weren't there for me, they were there for optics. They came to prove they were doting grandparents, not because they truly cared about the baby growing inside me. Then came the moment I'll never forget. When I held Isabel for the first time, just minutes after birth, I cried because she had the same tiny years I did as a baby. That feeling, like someone had handed me back a piece of myself I never knew was missing. Michael looked at me, eyes wet. "She looks just like you. She's a miracle, Josie." My mother visited on the second day. She glanced at the bassinet and pulled out a chair. "She looks fragile, doesn't she? Hopefully she grows up to look like Vanessa." Makes success easier. I sat there, frozen. Michael squeezed my hand gently under the blanket. I didn't respond. I had nothing left to hope for from them anymore. Isabel passed away on a freezing January morning, before the sun even peeked through the frost-covered window. The night before, she had finished her bottle, played with the little silver bunny gifted by my mother-in-law, then drifted off in my arms, just like every other night. I laid her in the crib, drew the curtains, double-checked the room temperature, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, just like the pediatrician said. No blanket, no pillows, no oversized stuffed animals. Everything was by the book. I remember her sleepy smile as I kissed her forehead goodnight. At 6 a.m., I jolted awake with a strange sense of emptiness. By that hour, Isabel was usually fussing for food, but the house was eerily quiet. I rushed to her room. The pale yellow walls shimmered under the cold winter light, and there she was, in the white crib, completely still. Her face was bluish, her lips ice cold. I screamed until my voice broke. Michael ran in from the bedroom, slipping on the plush rug. He dropped to his knees by the crib, his hands shaking as he started CPR. I trembled as I dialed 911, trying to steady my voice to give our address. When the paramedics arrived, I was still in my pajamas, barefoot, hair a mess, frozen in the corner of the room. At the hospital, the doctor came over, clutching his clipboard, eyes heavy. "We did everything we could. I'm very sorry. She didn't make it." It was likely sudden infant death syndrome. SID. I couldn't breathe. I heard myself sobbing, but the sound felt like it was coming from someone else. Once I calmed down a little, I took out my phone. My hands still smelled like antiseptic. I called my mother. "Mom, the baby, Isabel, she's gone." Silence for a few seconds. Then she replied, like I had just canceled a tea party. "Oh, really? That's awful. But how? Just yesterday you sent us a picture of her, smiling." I gripped the phone tighter. It was Sid's. The doctor said she passed in her sleep. "Mom, can you come to the hospital?" "Well, your dad and I are about to head to California. Bradley's engagement party is this weekend, remember? The bride's family is super picky. Canceling would be embarrassing." I tried to raise my voice. "Mom, my daughter died. You're talking like it's no big deal." She snapped this time, her patience gone. "Josie, I know you're upset, but don't take it out on everyone else. People have lives. You're young, you can have another baby. But engagements, those are once in a lifetime." I let the phone fall from my hand like someone free-falling into a bottomless pit. Michael wrapped his arms around me like he was afraid I'd disappear too. The day of the funeral, Portland was bone-chillingly cold. Misty rain blew across a ground layered with snow. I wore a navy coat and carried Isabel's photo album to Rose Hill Cemetery. The tiny casket sat in the middle of the Angel Garden, a section reserved for children who never got the chance to grow up. White lilies covered it. Everyone who came held tissues and red-rimmed eyes. Michael's family sat in the front row, right beside me. They placed hands on my shoulders, whispering words I couldn't hear, but felt. My friends came, my fellow nurses. Not one person from my family showed up. No message from my father, no call from my mother, no apology, no embrace, not even a single flower. As the minister read the final farewell, my phone buzzed. I opened it just to silence the ringer, but the words on the screen froze me in place. "Bradley, hope the funeral went okay. Mom says don't let this ruin everyone's week. Good luck." I quietly slipped the phone back into my pocket, then clutched Isabel's first ultrasound photo so tightly the edges bent. After the service, my friend Carmen gently asked, "Where's your family, Joe?" I bit my lip, avoiding her gaze. "I'm not sure. Probably busy." Busy. That word lodged in my throat like a splinter. Busy. So they left their daughter to mourn her own child. Busy. So they chose poolside champagne over a 6-month-old's casket. That night, I sat alone in Isabel's room. Her owl-shaped nightlight still glowed its soft blue hue. And I knew if silence was all they ever gave me, then it was time I spoke up, for my daughter. Loud and clear, and I would never forgive them for calling her just a baby. After the funeral, I returned home feeling like my soul had been wrung dry. The house was unusually quiet, as if every sound that had once lived there had left with Isabel. Michael helped me take off my coat, then silently placed a cup of hot tea on the table. I sat on the couch, staring at the baby rocker still in the corner of the living room. I don't know how long I sat there, until my phone buzzed. A flurry of notifications from Instagram, tags, stories, new posts from Vanessa's account. I hadn't planned to check, but something in me reached for the screen anyway, and then I saw it. A photo, bathed in golden sunset light beside a pool, string lights twinkling above, a long table covered in white cloth, lined with champagne glasses and fresh flowers. In the center, my parents, smiling like the world held no grief. My mom in a navy moon dress, her hair curled perfectly, raising a champagne glass. My father toasting Vanessa's dad, his face beaming with pride, the caption read. "Honored to welcome the Morgan family into ours. Let the celebrations begin. Engagement vibes, poolside dreams." I froze. 3 miles away, my daughter lay underground in the cold earth. I had written the eulogy myself. I had picked out the flowers, held on to Michael as he nearly collapsed, placing the first handful of soil over our daughter's casket. And they, my own parents, were celebrating a once-in-a-lifetime occasion. I sat still, the tea in my hands long gone cold. Michael walked in from the kitchen, about to ask if I wanted something to eat, but when he saw my face, he stopped. I handed him the phone without saying a word. He looked, and his expression turned to ice. He sat down next to me, his voice hoarse. "They're throwing an engagement party while we just buried our baby?" I nodded. He gripped my hand, then let go. He stood up, pacing like he wanted to punch through the wall. "Do you want me to call them?" I shook my head. "No, I want them to realize what they've done." I opened Instagram again. I didn't know what I was searching for. A caption of regret? A story in memory of Isabel? But there was nothing, just laughter, toasts, music. There was a video. Vanessa cutting the cake, my mother cheering beside her. Cut it so we can have the wedding soon." In the background, my father swirled his wineglass, took a sip, and laughed after whispering something into Bradley's ear. I paused the video, my hands shaking with rage. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind so cold and deep it leaves no blood left to boil. I pulled up a photo of Isabel, the one I'd taken last week when she was giggling at her purple owl plushie. Her eyes squinted, her cheeks round and rosy. I placed the two images side by side. One was laughter, one was death. One held champagne, the other a tiny casket covered in white flowers. I texted my mom. Just one line. "You know what? Isabel is gone, but at least you got to raise your glass." No reply. 15 minutes later, a message from Bradley. "Don't drag everyone into your gloom. Today's a happy day." I don't know if I cried from pain, shock, or the bitter realization. To them, my daughter never really existed. I got up and walked into Isabel's room. The air still carried the faint scent of baby shampoo. The stuffed animals, the diapers, the diaper rash cream, everything was still in place. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, eyes fixed on the ceiling. One thought came clear, as if whispered to me. They chose cake over a coffin, and they think no one will speak of it, but I will. I won't let Isabel be buried a second time in silence, in the pretense that she was never here. 2 weeks after Isabel's funeral, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was unnaturally gentle, like the last few weeks had been nothing more than a passing April drizzle. "We're having dinner this weekend. I'm making your favorite roast. It's been a while since the whole family got together." I paused for a few seconds. "You really think it's been a while is a good enough reason to forget you skipped your granddaughter's funeral?" She went quiet for a beat, then let out a dry laugh. "Josie, don't be so difficult. Everyone's hurting, but living in grief isn't healthy. You need to get back to normal." I should have hung up, but something in me needed this. Maybe a final attempt to believe that if we just faced each other honestly, they'd see what they'd done. So I said yes. Sunday evening, I pulled my hair into a low bun and wore a charcoal gray sweater. Michael offered to come with me, but I shook my head. I need to face them alone. The house looked the same as it always had: plush carpet, vintage chandelier, framed family portraits lining the walls. But one new photo stood on the mantel. Bradley and Vanessa at the pool party, where my parents chose to bask in sunlight instead of standing with me in the cold beside their granddaughter's grave. My mother opened the door, beaming. "You're home! Still too thin. Make sure you take some cake later." I didn't answer. I stepped in, everything familiar enough to make me feel like I couldn't breathe. Bradley was on the sofa with a glass of red wine, Vanessa beside him, all smiles like she was filming a story. My father looked up from his paper, gave a slight nod. "You made it." Dinner was served: roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans sautéed in butter, my childhood favorites. Now they made me nauseous. We sat down. No one mentioned Isabel. Not a single condolence, not one question. No sign that they even remembered what I'd been through. My mom started. "Vanessa just landed a sponsorship with an organic skincare brand. Her shoot will be in next month's magazine." Bradley chimed in proudly. And I'm finalizing a deal to acquire a law office in the Pearl District. If all goes well, we'll be moving headquarters in 3 months. I looked at each of them. My heart beat slow and heavy, like iron in my chest. Finally, I set down my fork and knife. My voice was steady, but my words cut clear. Is anyone going to mention my daughter? Or are we still pretending no funeral ever happened? The room froze. My father furrowed his brow. Didn't we all agree to keep tonight peaceful? Peaceful? I repeated, almost laughing. You skipped your granddaughter's funeral to attend a pool party, then acted like nothing happened. And now you're talking about magazine shoots and office expansions? I'm not a stranger in this family. My mother set her fork down and adjusted her napkin. You're blowing things out of proportion. We were all heartbroken, but life has to go on. I gripped the armrest of my chair. You knew my baby died at 6 months old. You knew I planned the funeral alone. You knew I stood at the cemetery by myself. And you still chose a champagne toast over holding my hand. That's not moving on. That's indifference. Bradley sighed and shook his head. Here we go again. You always play the victim. Ever think that maybe the rest of us have our own problems too? I looked him straight in the eye. I lost my child, Bradley. That's a kind of pain that leaves people permanently broken. No one said a word. Vanessa kept her eyes down, fiddling with her phone. My father finally spoke, slow and measured. Come on, Josie. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. What's done is done. I stood up. My voice wasn't loud, but each word was razor sharp. I can't move on when you're pretending my pain never happened. And I can't share a table with people who treat my daughter's death like a passing inconvenience. My mother shot up, her tone sharper. Hello? So what do you want? For us to get on our knees and apologize? I looked at her, the woman I once curled up beside when I had nightmares. Now she was just a cold face, painted with makeup and cloaked in controlling logic. I don't want anything. I just want you to know that from this day forward, I'm done pretending. I turned and walked away from the table, stepped through the oak door I'd known my whole life, and somehow my chest felt just a little bit lighter. Not because I'd been forgiven, not because they'd changed, but because now I knew. I will carry my grief honestly, without asking permission, without apologizing, and I won't wait for anyone to acknowledge it. That night, after walking out of that family dinner, feeling like I'd just crawled out of a bottomless pit, I sat in my car for hours, hands trembling on the wheel, but my mind was cold as winter glass. I didn't cry anymore. I'd run out of tears a long time ago. For the first time, I expected nothing from them. Not an apology, not a hug, not even a guilty glance. But that didn't mean they'd get to forget, not in silence. Not in the kind of practiced blindness they'd mastered better than anyone. I made a decision I would never stay silent again. 3 days later, I began digging through an old hard drive. There were hundreds of family photos from over 20 years. Every single one followed a pattern. Bradley in the center, me off to the side, usually behind the camera or hidden behind someone's arm. I opened every album, saved every photo where my head was cropped out, where I was ignored, or where I existed only to highlight my brother's achievements. In one from my 13th birthday, you could clearly see the cake said "Happy Birthday, Josie," but both my parents were looking toward Bradley, holding a new guitar he'd gotten on my birthday. I opened an old phone, too, searching for texts I'd once ignored to keep the peace. Like the one my mom sent the day I graduated college. Congrats. Oh, your brother just got featured in Young Entrepreneurs magazine. So proud of him. Or the message I got when I told her I was pregnant. Make sure you eat and sleep well. But guess what? Vanessa just got picked to host a new online talk show. I took screenshots, saved them, labeled the folder receipts. I called Aunt Carol, my mom's younger sister, one of the few relatives who still spoke to me after Isabel's funeral. I need to ask you something. At Isabel's funeral, what did Mom and Dad tell everyone about why they couldn't come? There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "They said your father had sudden back pain. He was bedridden, and your mother stayed to take care of him, said they couldn't leave. I closed my eyes. Did they mention the engagement party? No? Not a word, but I saw the photos that night, the pool party. My heart just dropped. She let me record the call with her permission. I called 4 more relatives. Each one repeated the same lie. They didn't just skip the funeral, they lied about it. And to me, that was worse than being absent. I printed out all the materials, put them in a navy moon folder, Isabel's favorite color. On the cover, I taped a photo of her. Wide eyes, soft baby hair, a smile round as a new moon. I wrote a handwritten letter, 3 full pages, no yelling, no guilt-tripping, just truth and the cost of ignoring it. I wrote, I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm not begging for love. I'm writing because I can't keep living like this is normal. Isabel wasn't a shadow, and neither am I. If you can't look back at what you missed, then at least you must face the consequences of your choices. Sunday, I took the folder and the letter and went back to the old house in Salem. Michael drove me there, parked 2 blocks away. I wanted to walk in alone. My mother opened the door. The smell of almond cookies was thick in the air. Oh, Josie, I didn't expect you. Come in. I just pulled out a fresh batch. I held up a hand. Mom, I didn't come for cookies. I walked in, sat down on the living room couch. My father was reading the paper, didn't even look up. I placed Isabel's photo on the coffee table, next to it, the folder. I said, today, I'm here to make one thing clear. This isn't about one day. This is a lifetime of being left behind. No one spoke. I kept going. I've let hundreds of moments slide. But not this time. Because it didn't just hurt me. It touched a life that never even got to speak. And you didn't just turn your backs. You lied. I slid the folder toward them. Everything's in there. Texts, photos, statements from family. I'm not here to debate, I just need acknowledgement. I stood up. My voice trembled slightly, but I was steady. I won't call, I won't text, I won't answer. Unless one day you find the courage to look at that little girl in the photo and say, from your hearts, we were wrong. That's when you can call me. I turned and walked out. On the drive back, I leaned my head against the window. The wind outside was cold, but something inside me burned, steady and clear. The fire of a mother who refuses to be invisible ever again. 3 weeks after I placed the folder and Isabel's photo on my parents' coffee table, not a single call came. No message, no email, no letter. I wasn't surprised. That's how they always reacted when they couldn't control the situation. Silence, denial, avoidance. I figured this would be no different, that they'd quietly tear up my letter, shove the folder into some drawer to gather dust, and return to their cocktail parties and perfectly planned family gatherings like every other year. But on a Thursday afternoon, while I was watering the small garden behind our house, our space of remembrance for Isabel, the doorbell rang. I walked out. A mail carrier stood there, holding a thick envelope addressed in firm, slightly left-leaning handwriting. The kind I remembered from my father's old banking notebooks. I took the envelope, shut the door, and stood silently in the hallway for a few minutes before opening it. It was a handwritten letter, 3 pages long, pale yellow paper, no perfume, no embellishments. Each sentence was a slow, clean cut, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Ushosine? I don't know where to begin. All my life, I believe silence was how you held a family together. Don't dig too deep. Don't confront. Don't disturb the peace. I was wrong. When your daughter died, I should have been there, not just to offer condolences, but to stand next to you, to hold you, to take your hand. But I didn't, and that's something I'll carry for the rest of my life. I reached the last line and slid down onto the kitchen floor. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I'm only asking if I could look at her photo, just once, if you'll let me. For the first time in my life, I saw something I never thought I would. My father apologizing. Not out of pressure, not for appearances, but because he knew he was wrong. A week later, my mother showed up, unannounced. I was organizing items in Isabel's memorial room, the place where I kept a few of her belongings: the purple knit hat, the embroidered bib with her name, the ultrasound photo from the 5th month. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, she was standing there holding a photo frame, her eyes swollen. No lipstick, no perfume, no usual ivory blazer that screamed elegance. Just a mother, and maybe, for the first time, a grandmother. I'm sorry for coming without calling first, but I didn't know how to say this over the phone. I didn't invite her in, but I didn't close the door either. She understood that was permission. We sat across from each other in the living room. She placed the photo frame on the table. It was a picture of Isabel, the one I'd sent her via text, which she never replied to. I printed it, placed it on my vanity. No one knows. I hid it. I hid my feelings because I was afraid that if I acknowledged the pain, I'd have to face what I'd done. I said nothing. She continued, "You weren't the invisible child. It's just, I let social expectations, all these ideas about success and duty, blind me from what mattered most. A child who is gone. My granddaughter, my daughter's daughter." Then she cried, not performatively, not covering her face. She just cried, the same way I had, in Isabel's room, alone, for weeks after the funeral. For the first time in my life, I didn't see my mother as a rigid woman obsessed with control and denial. I saw someone breaking down under the weight of time she couldn't rewind. She gently touched the photo. "If you're willing, I'd like to plant something in your garden. A flower, something that can live on, to remind me of what I lost because I was too busy doing what I thought was right." 3 days later, someone knocked at the garden gate. I was weeding around the tulips. I looked up and saw Bradley standing there, gray t-shirt, holding a pod of baby pink miniature roses. I know I'm the last person you want to see, and I know I'm late, maybe the last one to come, but I'm not here to talk about me. I nodded, no smile. But I didn't turn away either. We dug in silence. He placed the rose plant into the earth, covered the roots with fertilizer. When he was done, he stood there, staring at it for a long time. I never realized how deep the hurt went. When you spoke about pain, I thought you were exaggerating. But that night, after I saw her photo, I stared at myself in the mirror and couldn't close my eyes. I asked, "And what did you see?" He swallowed hard. "An uncle who never showed up. A brother who failed you, and a man who needs to change if he doesn't want to keep hurting the people who matter most." I didn't forgive him right away, but I knew this little pink rose bush in our garden would never bloom into anything ugly. Because for the first time, they didn't break down because I demanded it. They broke down because they couldn't stand who they had become. That spring, when the snow melted and Isabel's memorial garden began to bud, I felt like my body could finally take a full breath after months of living in the ashes of memory. I never thought I'd be able to stand up again. I couldn't even imagine what life after loss would look like. But one day, as I was making coffee in the kitchen, I looked out into the backyard, where the blush pink rosebush Bradley planted bloomed next to the tulips my mother had nurtured, and a wooden plaque that Michael carved by hand read, "Isabel's light." And I knew. My daughter was still here, in her own way. I decided to return to work, but this time not just as a neonatal nurse like before. I signed up for a spiritual support program for families who lost young children at the hospital where I used to work. At first, it was just small counseling sessions: a young mother who lost her baby to congenital heart disease, a single dad who had just buried his 3-year-old daughter after an accident. I sat with them in a softly lit room, poured tea, listened, and didn't say much. Just gave them a place to collapse without being judged. Then I started being invited to share in group sessions, and one June morning, I told Isabel's story for the first time, from her first smile to that fateful night. No one said anything when I reached the part about receiving the photo of my parents holding champagne glasses, but their eyes, the tight handshakes after the session, told me everything. I wasn't alone, and I had done the right thing. I began to write. Not books, not a blog, just letters. To mothers I had never met, but who had walked through a pain I knew too well. I printed them, sealed them in simple envelopes, and sent them through the organization I partnered with. In every letter, I always included this line: "You don't have to be strong all the time. You just have to not disappear." In September, the hospital invited me to help establish a group called Forget Me Not Moms, for women who had lost children under the age of 2. I chose the name. I still remember the quote: "Forget-me-nots are flowers that never demand attention, but they're always there." Just like Isabel. The monthly gatherings became the safest place I'd ever known. One mother once broke down in the meeting room because she couldn't bring herself to take down the crib. Another whispered that she was scared to have another child, as if it would betray the one she lost. I didn't offer fixed advice. I just shared what I had lived, what I had failed at, what had hurt me. And over time, I realized pain doesn't vanish, but it can become a place where others find direction. Michael saw that change in me. One time, he hugged me tightly and said, "I see you're walking not because of the weight, but because of the meaning." We began talking about starting a memorial fund in Isabel's name. Nothing grand, just enough to help cover funeral costs for families in need. To me, it was a way to help mothers not have to choose between grief and a bill. Then one early winter day, while I was wrapping Christmas gifts for the Forget Me Not group, I received a package from my mother. A small box. Inside was a knitted doll wearing a purple dress with brown hair and blue eyes. Attached was a handwritten note. "I'll never ask for forgiveness, but if you hold her in your heart with love, I'll carry her in mine with remorse for the rest of my life." I placed the doll on the wooden shelf in the memorial room, next to Isabel's framed photo and a card I don't even remember who sent. "Love never dies, it just changes form." I never asked for revenge. I didn't want to see them fall apart. I only ever asked for one thing: recognition. That my daughter existed, that my pain was real, that silence and indifference could never erase the worth of a small, precious life. And when the people who once turned away began to come back, not with excuses, but with actions, I understood that this journey, no matter how rocky, was not meaningless. Isabel never disappeared. She's just been guiding me from the other side of silence. Josephine's story is a powerful reminder that loss cannot be replaced, but it can be transformed into meaningful action. When betrayed by her own family during her most painful moment, she didn't seek revenge. She stood up for her daughter's recognition. Out of silence and sorrow, Josephine found her voice, her purpose, and a community healed by unconditional love. In real life, healing doesn't come from forgetting, but from the courage to remember and keep living with the truth. What do you think of Josephine's choice? Would you have the same courage in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.